Business, want to say a little bit in by way of introduction. Business 1000 survey, it's a joint London Chamber of Commerce and Industry, the LCCI, and London Council's annual survey of more than 1,200 London business leaders. And we ask their views on a range of different and important issues. Businesses are incredibly important to the vitality of our boroughs and our local economy, so we really need to hear their voice and their views. This is the 7th year we've jointly commissioned the Business 1000 survey, and so we've built up some useful trend data as well on areas such as take-up of apprenticeships. We launched the latest survey as a report in December, and today we're going to focus on some of the data that we think will be most interesting for you as councillors. The full report can be found on the London Council's website, and we will be circulating all the slides and the link to the full report after this event. So you can find out more and dig a bit deeper if you need to. There will be plenty of time for questions, and as I say, please use the Q&A function as we go through the slides if a question comes to you, and then we can go through those as we have a bit of discussion about the findings. So I'm going to now introduce our two speakers. So first one, Stephen King, he's Head of Business and Enterprise at London Councils. And Stephen will start by briefly going through some of the key findings of the report. And then we'll move on to James Watkins. He's Head of Policy and Public Impact at the LCCI. And James will respond talking about the business perspective, a bit about business confidence and what business sees as priorities for London government. So I'm going to hand over now to Stephen, who's going to take you through, as I say, the key findings of the report with a bit of a focus on devolution, apprenticeships, sustainability and crime. So over to you, Stephen.
Thank you very much, Diana. Yes, going on to the first slide of the presentation, just to say, yes, this is the 7th year that we've done this with the London Chamber of Commerce and Industry. And so, as Diana said, we've got some great trend data on it. So we were in a fairly stable time in terms of October 2023, in terms of kind of post-COVID and some of the trends. So it's a pretty robust survey. So the moving on. The results are broken down, and you can go into the report and you can see that how the results are broken down. We can break them down by business size, the number of employees. So we look at micros through to large firms. We can also have enough in there to break it down by sectors, so we can understand what different sectors, retail versus wholesale, for example, what that looks like, and other trades. And we can also break it down sub-regionally. Unfortunately, the amount of businesses who would need to survey to do have this data at a borough level is just so large that we couldn't afford to do it. But we're happy to have a discussion with boroughs if they are thinking about doing some work like this. So looking at the first topic so we're looking at devolution and business priorities. We wanted to understand what businesses saw as a priority around public government. So looking at the issues around support for devolution, this is the second time we've asked this question to boroughs, and again we're really pleased by the strong level of support. About 1 in 7 businesses are saying that they support further devolution to London boroughs, and that's across a whole range of areas. So we can obviously use this in our lobbying with national government to say, you know, it's not just it's not just us that's calling for this, it is businesses as well. And what's interesting is when you go into the detail of it, these kind of sentiments are reflected at this kind of level across the whole of London. So there's no sub-regional differences, and across all the sizes of business, there seems to be a strong support for devolving things like funding around housing, funding around delivery of infrastructure, community safety and policing, and also the skills agenda, strong support. What is interesting, the last time we asked this question was in 2019, and there has been a slight fall from about 1 in 8 support down to about 1 in 7 support in this data, but that's that's an interesting point. On the next slide, we then asked them to, we gave them a series of options, and we asked the businesses to vote for their top 3 in terms of what you see as the top 3 areas. If we did have devolved business rate spending in London, where should we spend our money? And it's interesting that public transport's high up there, reducing crime. This is the first year that we actually asked this question, and crime is high up there. And again, building houses were very strong in those areas and where we wanted those changes. But if you look in other areas, it drops off quite strongly. So again, again, we thank you. For about upskilling workforce, it's about 20%. Strong support for air quality, about 29% want to see air quality as a priority. But interestingly, things like provision of affordable workspace was quite low in terms of where they think we should be spending our business rates. Sorry, next slide, please. Now, the hotel tax, you may have heard of this. This is a kind of a proposed levy on overnight stays. And this is something that a number of boroughs and a number of cities, and Manchester's looking at it as well. It's a way to charge a little extra onto somebody's hotel bill, basically, and you then hypothecate that money to spend on local services. So it's similar to what we're familiar with business improvement districts, for example. And again, what's interesting is there were very strong support for this in businesses in terms of 60% say they supported it. What's also interesting is if you break it down by sector, that actually the accommodation and hotel sector is still pretty strong. It's about 56% support the introduction of a hotel tax. So again, we'll be using that in our lobbying around national government to say that we should be allowed to introduce this additional levy to support local areas. So looking on, we were interested to look at what do businesses think the impact of housing and transport is on their ability to recruit staff, on their ability to retain staff. It will probably surprise none of you to see that housing costs and transport costs are having a big impact on businesses' ability to retain and recruit staff. We asked businesses, and we have asked businesses for a number of years on their ability to, do they find a problem in terms of recruiting the right staff? Again, this year we saw about 56% saying they, 65% saying they had difficulties recruiting. That's slightly down on 2022 figures, where it's 71%. But retaining and recruiting staff is a problem, and this clearly shows that one of the issues is the housing costs in London. Next slide, please. So then we looked at apprentices, and this is something that we've looked at pretty much from the beginning of this survey. So we've got some interesting longitudinal data on this. So again, we're seeing some positive news around the uptake of apprentices within micro and small businesses, quite a significant increase. However, not so strong on medium-sized businesses, and on large businesses it's stayed pretty static in terms of the percentages of businesses employing apprenticeships. So slightly disappointing there. And again, businesses in the east, south and west are much more likely to be employing an apprentice than businesses in the centre, which again is a slightly disappointing result. So looking forward to the next slide, we asked what are the barriers to you employing apprenticeships? And again, a lot of businesses saying they just weren't appropriate for their businesses. That was strongest actually amongst micros, where they were saying that they just weren't getting the appropriate, it wasn't appropriate for their businesses, while larger businesses possibly because they've got a broader range of opportunities, were much more less likely to say that. We also asked them about the apprenticeship levy. And again, well over half of them were saying they would like to see greater freedoms around the levy, and well over half of them are saying they wanted to have greater freedoms about how they could spend the levy. Could they use it more for training? And again, those are the kind of results that we'll be using in our lobbying. Looking forward to the next slide. Again, interesting for us boroughs in terms of the level of engagement with boroughs on apprenticeships. It's gone up, which is good news for us. But that bold figures hides big regional variations. Again, it's interesting in the central London boroughs, there's a lot less engagement between employers and boroughs on apprenticeships is what our results show. And again, SMEs are about 70% say they have little or no engagement with their boroughs, while larger businesses, it's about 50-50 in terms of engagement with their boroughs. So it's going in the right direction, but it's interesting. There's big regional variations and big variations in terms of the size of the business. So looking onwards, we've asked businesses a couple of times about sustainability and their approach to sustainability. Again, a lot of businesses saying they're doing stuff. A lot of businesses see it as important to them. And, again, it's some good, strong trends. That last one about the retail firms, we're seeing a big increase there in terms of retail firms taking action. What that action looks like can sometimes be, things like enabling working from home, for example, which is partly a COVID response, but they are saying, reducing their staff's need to travel as part of their sustainability objectives as well. Then we asked them about barriers to delivering sustainability. On the next slide, we can see the results. And again, it won't probably surprise to see you that actually cost was one of the high barriers to them actually taking action on reducing their emissions. But what's also interesting is that, just having the in-house knowledge to know what to do is something that they found as a barrier. And we know that that they're, just knowing where to get the right advice remains an issue for many businesses in terms of tackling their emissions. So again, a role for boroughs. But looking on, we did actually ask the businesses, what would you like from your local council in terms of supporting your sustainability? Again, it probably won't surprise you, tax breaks. But it's interesting, somewhere like Sutton, and we can talk about that in another time, Sutton is taking steps to basically give some of their local businesses a business rates relief if they join their local green business network. And they worked out a scheme which is pretty much revenue neutral in terms of getting businesses to join it by offering a tax break around business rates. So that is possible. But it's interesting there that we've seen things like recycling services, green grants, and again just general support for knowledge about what to deliver and technical advice. So again, you can look at all these results in our report, which we'll send the link around. Looking onwards, crime. So for the first time this year, very much driven by what the business groups were telling us, we looked more in detail on crime. So perceptions of crime and whether it's gone up. So rather worryingly, a strong increase. Again, interesting enough, there's no difference sub-regionally on these figures. Across London, they're pretty consistent, although in difference between sectors. So perceptions of crime and experience of crimes are higher generally in things like wholesale and the construction industry. They're showing, more of an impact than some of the others. And then we asked them about the experience of crime, and then going on about the experience of crime. So of that 20% who have experienced crime, these are the kind of things that they are facing. And again, they are quite strong in terms of, you know, actual physical activity happening, what they're seeing going onwards. Where would they like to see resources to help tackle this? And again, police investigations very high, and again probably the strongest in areas like retail. Like to see that. Though interesting enough, retail was stronger when talking about greater involvements of local authorities in crime prevention. And I know that there's a number of crime prevention partnerships around London, networked around town centres to look at this issue of crime prevention. So I'm going to finish it there. I want to do the final one, and we will circulate this link and be very happy to take any questions about it after James has spoken. Thank you.
Thanks, Stephen. That's great. I think we're going to be doing a bit of a swapping of the slides for the minute, and then James is going to, as I say, respond from the business perspective of about the survey. So over to you, James.
Thank you very much, Diana, and thank you, Stephen, for that really fascinating overview of the London Business 1000 survey results. It's really good to see all of you today, and I just want to say how the London Chamber of Commerce and Industry is delighted to be continuing its fantastic working relationship with London councils, with each of your local authorities, and of course with Stephen and the team. The London Chamber of Commerce is the capital's largest independent business representative organisation, and at the same time we also have affiliate chambers of commerce, which I'm sure many of you know, in each of your boroughs. So we're very much linked to community activity and ensuring we get a real difference across the capital in every single area. And our work is very much mirrored to the findings of the London Business 1000 survey, as we will now see in the next slide. So what did we achieve working with you and also with the Mayor of London in 2023? Well, the first slide you'll see next is on ULEZ. Now, I know many of you have concerns about ULEZ, so did the business community. This wasn't basically based on the issue about air quality. We actually accepted the evidence that was being presented to us from Imperial College London that there was an issue with air quality. Our concern was that the policy should be implemented with the needs of small and medium-sized businesses at its core. And we were concerned that if there had not been an adequate ULEZ vehicle scrappage scheme, that many of the businesses that I represent would frankly go to the wall. We are relieved that the Greater London Authority did agree to that vehicle scrappage scheme, which, as you know, is £7,000 per vehicle for up to 3 vehicles if a business employs up to 50 people. So that was a good achievement. But we are working, of course, closely on ensuring that transport issues, which did dominate much of the findings in the London Business 1000 survey, continues. Next slide, please. Another key issue that we have started work on with London councils and with some of your local authorities, though not all, is the issue of procurement. Now, sometimes procurement is seen as an issue which is seen as not core to the needs of London and to business success. But actually, while it does not grab the headlines, procurement is absolutely vital to ensure that we have strong, successful local businesses. But it's not just an altruistic aim. We do believe that having bite-sized contracts which are accessible to local businesses in your boroughs actually leads to greater value for money. And there's been lots of surveys and studies from SIPFA to ACCA to ICAEW and many others, which has really provided a strong evidence base to that effect. We're pleased that the GLA has begun slowly a reform of its procurement practices, and we welcome this development. We also welcome the reform that the government has introduced in response to our representations, which are now in the Procurement Act, which will make it easier for small businesses to access procurement contracts. We wish the government and the mayor had gone further, but nonetheless, we are grateful to both the government and regional government for going in the right direction, and we would welcome the opportunity to work with each and all of you to ensure that your local authorities get value for money, plus jobs are created in your areas. Next slide, please. Another key issue that definitely came up, as you just heard from Stephen, is the issue of skills. And the London Chamber is working with several other business organisations such as Business London, the Federation of Small Businesses and the CBI to ensure that the local skills improvement plan is implemented in your boroughs. One of the key issues in that LSIP or local skills improvement plan is the call for flexible and agile training. Now, in the past, in businesses were told to expect potential learners to have to go to a campus at certain allotted hours during the working week. But with the way that nature of business and how it operates today, that isn't feasible in the 2020s to the same extent it may have been in the past. That's why one of the key features of the LSIP process, which the London Chamber specifically called for, is flexible and agile training. And that is something that we're grateful that the Secretary of State for Education and the Mayor of London have both endorsed. But frankly, this can only work by working locally at a borough-wide level. So again, we hope we can work with all of you in the time ahead. Next slide, please. There's other issues that I could touch on. We've worked, I know, for those of you in Kensington and Chelsea, and I know there was a serious issue in Brent a few days ago. We are working with local authorities and others to ensure that dangerous cladding is removed. The insurance industry had some problems in assessing risk. That seems to have been addressed by our intervention with the Housing Minister, and we can provide further information. Next slide, please. But a key issue for business is how does it just operate on a day-to-day basis? And this is fundamentally linked to the logistics industry. Now, there's a dichotomy in the London Business 1000 survey, which I'm just going to speak about a little bit here. Now, that dichotomy is this: business wants more affordable homes. One of the reasons why we have a skills crisis in London is because businesses cannot get the key workers that they need, because as you and I know, it's so difficult to live in many London boroughs. But at the same time, we need land for logistics. And the reason for that is we need just-in-time deliveries to continue. If we don't have just-in-time deliveries to continue, not only will our residents not be happy, of course, but businesses, large, small and medium, will just not be able to operate effectively, and they may even be forced out of the capital. Not only that, but it would actually lead to a rise in carbon emissions because of the impact, or the lack of impact, should I say, on meeting net zero. So this is something which, yes, we are working with regional London government on, but it's something that Steve and I and all of you in London councils would need to think about. How do we get that balance where we definitely need more affordable housing, but we definitely need that logistics land in place as well? Next slide, please. But another key issue is who will be the entrepreneurs of the future. Too often when we talk about working with young people, and I'm not really thinking about your work at a local government level, but other organisations, it's seen as a kind of stopgap issue to deal with concerns about gang crime, serious as that clearly is. But we also need the next generation of young entrepreneurs to drive our city forward and to create the jobs for the future. And too often we're not focusing enough attention on how can we support young people to be the entrepreneurs of the future. And it's too often people you know, looking at Stephen and I, of our age group, that are thinking about these issues, but we're not engaging maybe sufficiently with younger people. So what we're trying to do is work with all of you at a local government level, working with Stephen, but also working with regional government and central government to some extent to ensure that we do provide that support mechanism for young people. And I know many of you have incredibly impressive business support schemes, and we want to work with you to see how we can ensure that business support schemes lead to definable outcomes within the next 5 to 10 years at the very latest. Next slide, please. So I think we can move past that one. Next slide, please. Yeah, we can skip this one as well. So, because I know time is running short. So again, this is also linked to my earlier issue about helping with entrepreneurship. We are pushing for more support for minority ethnic owned businesses. In fact, we issued a report in May 2022 on this issue, and we also have a women in business group, which is again focusing on this issue as well. Next slide, please. So what is next for 2024? What is business asking for that will make a definable difference to the lives of residents and to the lives of many people who want good quality jobs in our local boroughs? Next slide, please. So clearly there is an attention on the local, on the regional elections that are coming up. Next slide, please. And of course on the general election as well. Next slide, please. But our members are also concerned about elections overseas because London is very much the most outward looking part of the United Kingdom. So therefore what happens overseas clearly has a direct impact on jobs and growth in London. That is not necessarily the case in other regions of the UK, which are maybe more inward looking, which actually clearly is not a good thing to be, but has its own dynamics, as it were. Next slide, please. So I'm happy to announce that in the next, within the next 1 to 2 months, we will be issuing a report that we have commissioned Centre for London to undertake. It's a spatial economic analysis of each of your boroughs. So despite the image, it excludes the City of London because I think that's been analysed many times, but it does look at the spatial economic needs of each of your boroughs and also what the potential direction of travel will be. So every single borough has been looked at, and we will be sharing that very, very shortly. And it's part of our commitment of working with you on a local borough-wide basis to get a real step change for our local economies and a real step change for communities. You know, for too long, people have said to me that certain areas of London are, you know, inherently deprived. We don't accept that in the London Chamber. We think actually Greater London is stronger together than apart. And this is part of our initiative, working with you to get that step change. Next slide, please. We'll be announcing our particular manifestos for the London mayoral, London Assembly and general elections. In fact, the London mayoral and London Assembly manifesto will be coming out within maybe a week or 2 weeks, so very, very shortly. Next slide, please. But let's go through what the top issues are finally in this last part of my presentation to you. Affordable housing, for the reasons I mentioned earlier, business needs those key workers. Next slide, please. Business support, we need to help the entrepreneurs of the future. That doesn't just mean, by the way, just young people. It means people of all ages and all backgrounds. As we know, the job for life is well and truly over. Next slide, please. There is an issue on terms of access to finance during this cost of living crisis. That was touched upon in the London Business 1000 survey, and it's something that we will have to revisit going forward. Next slide, please. We also need to look at whether the aviation sector that is so critical for London's success can meet net zero, and we're working with the airports to ensure that the sustainable aviation fuels are part of the London aviation future. That's important not just to meet net zero, but also for jobs in particular boroughs. Next slide, please. And we also need to invest more in infrastructure. That means ensuring that we will have genuine, adequate electric vehicle charging infrastructure in outer London as well as inner London, and further support for public transport, including in East London and South East London as well. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. I think we can cover that. So I've mentioned skills and how critical the local London Skills Improvement Plan is going forward. Next slide, please. And clearly crime as well. So I think we could go to the final slide now. Thank you very much. So I hope that's given you a good overview of the key issues. I just want to end by saying that business does care, as you heard from Stephen, about sustainability. But we should ensure that sustainability is incorporated within everything that we do. That is something that we're encouraging the business community to do. And our surveys indicate the business community wants to be a partner in ensuring that London does become a net zero city. At the same time, we are living through a cost of living crisis. So we do need close working relationships with all of you to make that difference and to get that key change for our capital. Thank you again.
Thank you, James. That's a really thorough presentation of the Chamber's view, and very much echoed, I think, some of the themes that had come out of the Business 1000 survey as well. So we've now got a bit of time for questions from people on the call. I don't see any being posted in the Q&A section, so I'm going to see if anybody wants to try and raise their hand and ask any questions of Stephen or James. Obviously, lots of information, quite rich information there, but be really good to hear from anybody if you've got any questions that you want to highlight. I see a hand, Councillor Lambert. So just wait a while the team unmute you, Councillor Lambert, and then you can ask your question.
I have to unmute myself as well, which I
Yeah,
did.
you're unmuted now. We can hear you.
I'm just. You probably said it, but if you did, I missed it. Who did you talk to? How many? Any particular segregation of them, etc. Be very interesting.
Yeah, I'm happy to answer that. Yeah, so there was a total of 1,251 businesses were spoken to across the whole of London. We used the polling firm YouGov to do the work, so it was an online questionnaire that was sent out to them. And if you go into the report, like I say, we'll circulate the data, but that was weighted by business size and weighted by the sub-regional makeup that I shared the map of, and then it was broken down by industry sectors again and weighted, and again that was using the standard government what they call SIP codes for different types of classification of businesses. So fairly thorough in terms of the of being able to break it down. And like I say, YouGov, who are very experienced in this area, did the weightings around the evidence. But what I think is interesting is where we were able to pick up some of those sub-regional differences and and business differences. And in the end of the report online, we do actually break down the results by sub-regions where there are significant variations. I hope that answers.
Thanks, Stephen. That was very thorough, and I think and also I think we talked to business leaders, didn't we? So we tended to try and target kind of senior decision makers rather than just anybody within the business as well. That was another key aspect of the thing. Any more questions? Any more people want to raise their hand at this point? Well, you've got Stephen and James as a captive audience, as it were. Oh, okay. There's a question in the Q&A. Sorry. On apprenticeships, this is from Councillor Brett. I wanted clarity on which types of businesses are taking them on. On one side, you mentioned take-up of small and micros, but then in another, they seem to be the ones with the biggest barriers. So just wanted to unpick, I think, that thing about who's actually taking on an apprenticeship.
That's a good question. I'm just looking through my report now. Bear with me a moment in terms of what type. What we did see was actually a sub-regional split that actually there was a lot of take up in the east actually, but it was lower in the west. I'm just going through my report to see if there's anything that stands out. But as you say, it was low take up by SMEs, but increasing take up by SMEs. In terms of actual sectors, so retail is growing in terms of taking up. Yeah.
And I think, just while you're looking, Stephen, I think that, the highest proportion is for large firms because they pay the apprenticeship levy. So you're getting about 45% of large firms taking on apprenticeships, slightly lower medium, but again, quite a lot of those, if they've got enough, if they've got a big enough staff bill, it's like £3 million, they'll take on apprenticeships. And it is lower on small and micro, but I think what we highlighted was actually there's been quite a good jump between 2022 and 2023 on small and micro. It increased from 13 to 20%. So that's maybe why you might got a bit confused about. So that was good because we'd seen a bit of an increased take up on it for SMEs, but I think they're still finding it difficult because actually apprenticeship system and we're going to be lobbying on that is quite difficult for SMEs to navigate. There's lots of admin, there's lots of bureaucracy, and if you're a small business and you haven't really got a HR department, it becomes really quite difficult for SMEs to kind of navigate the apprenticeship system. But James looks as though he wants to come in on that, so I'm going to hand over to him as well.
No, Diana, I agree with everything that you've just said, and that is absolutely true. I just wanted to highlight to Councillor Brett's question, to you, Councillor, and to all of you, that this is actually one of the good news stories of the Business 1000 survey. Actually, as Diana rightly said, we saw a significant uptake in the demand from businesses to employ apprentices, and this is despite the bureaucracy that Diana has expertly described. And in fact, you're seeing that demand, which is indicated in the report, from various sectors, including to some extent from environmental businesses who are based in the capital as well. There is a scheme, though, where unspent apprenticeship levy funds can be reallocated to small businesses in your boroughs, so that therefore it can be spent at a local level and therefore drive that uptick in demand for apprentices. I think this is something that we could maybe practically work with between the London Chamber and London councils and each of your boroughs to get that money levered into your boroughs. So there is a significant underspend, which is actually just sitting effectively in a Treasury bank account. And as we know at the moment, it's not even earning any interest. So, that's how bad it is. So that money can be allocated at a local level, and I think that's something that maybe we can explore going forward.
I would just add to that, and Diana actually knows more about this than me. We do a survey of boroughs with their apprenticeship levy, and we survey with boroughs how much they're spending and how much they're transferring as well to, that will be coming out. Sorry, Diana, when that comes out.
It is out already, and I think over the last 2-year period, collectively boroughs are sending half of their apprenticeship levy back to the Treasury, so 50%. It does vary between boroughs, so some boroughs are almost spending it all. and other boroughs are spending a lot less. So it's quite varied between boroughs. But I think I suppose it writs large the fact that I suspect if you don't have the capacity within your organisation to sort of actually deal with the apprenticeship levy, it often goes unspent. And I think that's the issue. And I think part of what we want to do, and hopefully we can be able to sort of do maybe some joint lobbying with LCCI, as you know, as a potentially either new or refreshed government comes in, is we keep asking them to reform the apprenticeship levy, because we feel that the funds really should be spent, could be better spent. And actually, if a government wants economic growth, which I think any government who comes in, a focus will be economic growth. Well, apprenticeships are a key way. So upskilling people is a key driver for economic growth. And so making the best use of that apprenticeship levy would be really quite helpful, we think, in terms of driving economic growth across London, as one of the things that we'd like to do. So okay, I don't see any more questions in the chat. Anybody else want to kind of raise their hand? We're almost at a close, but time for one quick question if people have it. I'm not seeing anything, so I think it's almost time as well. That went very quickly. But thanks so much to Stephen and James for coming and presenting all that information. As I said, we will circulate all this to you so that you can have a look at this in a bit more detail. If you've got any questions based on the more detailed look that you have, then do just let us at London Councils know, and we can hopefully answer your questions. But thanks very much for coming today. Thanks very much for as I say, to James and Stephen. I hope you have a rest of a good Tuesday, and hope to see you all soon again. Take care. See you soon. Bye bye.